and then 18 inches in the home, but that was an all underground market, if you will. That everything there was underground in that market. These are very, very interesting machines. What this picture isn't the one I saw, but what you may not see on the other side is just this huge rack of extender pipes that look like a rack of pipes at Home Depot or Mills Fleet Farm. And the drill goes out, drills 8 feet, comes back, uploads a new pipe, automatically inserts that pipe, heads back down the hole and drills another 8 feet, comes back, and that's all automatically feeding that extender throughout in this directional drill. And again, we use this to go through rock, we use this to go under driveways, that kind of thing. It doesn't work against all granite. Okay, so that's where a rock saw would come in. One of the problems with this solution is it takes a huge amount of water, just a huge amount of water constantly cooling in that. So in the winter months, it needs to be completely dewinterized every night when you store it. I mean, it's it's more difficult to operate this kind of equipment in very cold weather. Go ahead.
In our neighborhood, we have aerial coming in overhead, and when they get to our individual properties, it drops down and they trenched in with all the utilities, electrical, phone, etc. Can you use the existing trench and just reopen it and lay your fiber optic in there, or maybe is it necessary you do all the work to put a new trench in?
It isn't always clear, but we can't share anybody else's conduit.
Not a conduit. The
Right.
trench was quite large.
Quite was very large, and so it sometimes depends. I can't give you an answer.
But it can be done that way.
Yeah, we talked about this last time, and we had a technical answer, and I do not recall it.
Okay.
There was a reason why, if anybody remembers why we couldn't always follow the existing trench that was in place. One thing is we don't want to be digging up the power.
No, I understand.
Yeah, but there was anyway, I don't have an answer for you.
Okay.
All right. And then the other tool, the next tool that we use, and this is the walk behind cable plow. This actually feeds the conduit while it plows. So again, in Luxembourg, as an example, this is what we use on every home. This is exactly what we would use on every home is this, because of the terrain allowed it and things allowed it. So let's go to the next slide.
Whoops.
All right. So what you're looking at, that first picture, that's after the directional drilling was done down the road, and the handhole was set between every house hole, 2 houses, 1 handhole between them. And that was already repaired at the time this picture was taken. So after they did it, they seeded it, they dropped the hay. Now, weeks later, we're coming in and we're doing the drop from the handhole to the house. And that was one example of the walk behind more. And then the final picture is what you'll see, once that trench is repaired and replaced there. So we do repair the lawns, but as you repair them, but they look like somebody's been there. It's for a period of time before it goes. But the reason the hay and the thing is done is because that probably happened 3 weeks to 6 weeks before the drop did, or maybe longer, right? So that was already in place.
So there's 2 phases is what you're saying.
Well, there's getting the main line down the road, and then there's the drop to your home.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is again a picture from Luxembourg. This is what the outside of your house. So there's a box on the outside. It doesn't have any electronics in it. It's just a structure that holds a little extra of the cable, and then there's that cable goes down into the conduit with the handhole. You usually should see a picture of the conduit here. I don't know why we don't. Going up, but that would be more normal, and then into your house as well. On an aerial, this is what your yard will look like in an aerial picture. We took some pictures. I'm trying to remember. This is in Pulaski, Wisconsin, which has got a lot of aerial. Where we've just overbuilt the village of Pulaski, Wisconsin area. Those boxes hanging are called splitters. Splitters. And the other thing which you don't see here, you'll sometimes see slack loops. They look like figure eights. And it's just where the excess cable is stored in case there is a cable cut. Those slack loops are either in the ground in a larger handhole, or they're up on the wire, and you'll see them as you drive down the highway sometimes, or through cities. You'll see slack loops. But that's basically what your aerial will look like.
And I think it's important to point out that you are underneath the power by a certain amount of distance, correct?
Correct. Yeah, there's
some regulation or engineering reason for why you have to be that far away.
Yeah, and then also the kind of training your crew needs to get close to power lines, right? So we're not power technicians, so we have to stay so far away from.
And the reason I point that out is the first step on the aerial part of our town requires this analysis that has to go on, and that's going to take a little while to do, we learned. And based on what they come up with is what they're going to say, well, maybe we might need to replace that pole because it's not tall enough to get that distance between that wire and that wire. So I throw that out there as trying to be fully transparent about what it is that's going to happen next. And so there may be some utility related kind of delays. That's right, Wisconsin Public Service, which is now a wholly owned subsidiary of We Energies in Milwaukee.
Right. Yes, and we call that process the WPS process. We call it make ready. They make the poles ready. So we call it the make ready process. We have learned that this build is primarily on the main haul, on the main line is aerial. So the bulk of this is aerial, which is good news from a cost point of view, we believe. But from a time point of view, we're a little bit at the mercy of the electric company and what they can do and how soon they can give us the go ahead to begin construction. All right, I recently was in Mexico. I don't know if you can probably see this better online. You just can't. There are those splitter boxes. There are multiple splitter boxes in those branches all the way along there. So not only that huge cluster right on the pole, but right in the branches, multiple. So we'll be a little bit neater and tidier up here. One of our lead engineers is Skeeter, and I accused him of taking a trip down there and doing this work, but he wasn't. So, all right, aerial, what does it look? What does the outside of my house look like? The aerial, very, very similar concept. It's just coming from the top and the bottom. There's one box that we add on the side of your home to hold that little cable ring, but it does not hold the electronics. Usually, yeah, some special instances, but usually doesn't hold the electronics. All right, so there's 3 devices we're going to talk about that go in your home. All on the side. The one on the left is called an ONT. It's an optical network terminal. And that one you never touch. You move, it stays there. That's the final demarc of where the optical network ends and goes into your home. Okay. The next device is the Wi-Fi gateway. That is the router, often referred to as the router. That's the Wi-Fi gateway. So it will have an Ethernet plug into the optical network terminal, and that's where your network starts. All right. And then if you want additional coverage in your home, so one thing we talk about is where this is located. I think we talk about it next slide, but where is this located? We try to locate the gateway in the center of your home. That's where we try to locate it based on your aesthetics, based on some other things. That's where we do it. But we can also extend that with a Wi-Fi extender to anywhere you want. And actually, and Nathan will talk about some things that he can do if you need it out in the garage or something like that.
For instance, in a condo, can one service serve, like 4 units or 6 units or something?
So is it a condo where there's one main door and then you all walk in,
No,
or,
no.
or you each have, no, we'll bring a separate unit into each. Is the way we provide service. If you decide to share with your neighbors, that's kind of up to you, just like you can always share with your neighbor that you want, but no, we'll plan to bring, regardless either way, we'll plan to bring a fiber to each person who buys service.
Okay, so there's no cheating or anything.
That's completely up to you. That's completely up to you.
Yeah, no, I'm
Right.
asking that question.
Yeah.
You know, how far can you go as individuals, say in a sixplex or something, to have one service to do the whole place?
I mean, if you wanted, so in a hotel environment,
Yeah.
we bring one piece of fiber into the hotel, and then we do internal wiring
Mhm.
in the hotel. And so in a sense, a hotel has one service and is servicing all this room. In a condo situation, we design the solution to bring a separate fiber into each home. Now, if you were a creative person and you wanted to do some low voltage wiring throughout that condo and try to distribute that signal in a variety of ways, you probably could, and we would never know. All right?
No, it's not illegal, but
Right, not illegal at all, it's your signal.
that's, you know, I just
So,
want to know where you come, you know.
yeah, let's be very, again, be very transparent. You got a condo association? Yeah, maybe the condo association wants to buy 3 or something like that and split them across 6 units or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And what we're hearing is that's legal.
Legal, we can, yeah,
It may require some on-site work to get the wiring done right
Mhm.
one time, but
and then we have to be very careful about who can call for problems, because we have this thing called an authorized person on every account.
Hmm.
And if you spread this out and well, let's say there's children in the last one, they can't get their homework done that night.
Yeah.
And the authorized person isn't there to call us and say they need help there. And then, of course, if the problem is beyond that ONT thing, if we say, well, the problem's really in your wiring or something like else, we would need to charge you for that truck roll or any diagnostic time that we spend. So, you know.
I think if a
You would
place is
even do
a,
the wiring to serve 4 people, or 6 people in a unit?
We have a separate division that does business wiring. So
Yeah.
if it were for the condo association, we could do that. We don't do, for home wiring, it's kind of would be for within the home, I think, but
Yeah.
we would do it, but
and I think if a place is a full-time residence, it should definitely have its own service. You guys know there's a lot of places that might have a couple little cottages or something in a main home and then, or maybe a couple rooms connected to it. Those are the type of places you typically see internal wiring done in a shared connection, maybe with a guest network or something in a business environment. But if it's someone's primary residence or it's their home and they're unlocking their own door, they have their own address, that should have its own service.
and just remember that a local area network is a shared computing space. So your local area network, everything behind that gateway can really see everything else behind that gateway. So all of a sudden, you're sharing your computer space with a bunch of folks who aren't your family and that. And so, we really would say for a home service, you probably don't want to do that, but
Mhm.
there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah, like some people are permanent and some aren't,
Right.
Yeah.
and there's certain situations that,
Yeah.
some would be a weekenders or,
Right,
yeah.
part-time residents even, and
Yeah.
others are permanent residents, If
And-
there's a mixture like that.
and
And then the other thing, with sharing, would there be a loss of power, a loss of, you have a limit of 300, whatever those are. And then would that diminish, when you have shared,
I mean, you could engineer your way around that if you knew how to. I mean, if you have enough power and you knew how to. I think that the important point here is that we think you're putting yourself at undue risk. I can't emphasize enough that your data that is going from your computer to that device, any other computer on that network can see that data. Now, you might say, well, I've always got it encrypted or whatever, but that's, you're really putting yourself at a risk, I think, Nathan, if you're sharing a wide area network. Now, or a local area network. Now, again, people like Nathan could engineer you out of that situation if you're really trying to save $60 a month, you know, that he could engineer you out of that, but you're gonna pay for some solution. That is really a shared computing environment. Everything is really at a Ethernet layer. Everything behind that is available to everybody else.
And again, our solutions are meant for a singular address. So if it's a main home and there's some guest bedrooms or Airbnb or something on it, that's where, you know, you could engineer a solution that had a private guest network and a private home network. But if you call us and it's the neighbor's address or it's a separate address, we're gonna advise that you'd have to get a separate service.
So what I just want to interject, you know, because I want us to keep going too. I appreciate the questions. I think what we want you to hear is that Sam and I are working with the Bailey's Harbor Community Association on use cases specific to kind of business, commercial kinds of examples. And I think a condo association-ish, homeowners association-ish, multi-dwelling unit,
Multi-tenant units.
that kind of thing is something I think we should probably go back and maybe talk about having a separate conversation just to dig into the details on those things. So
I'm sure that question's gonna come up.
Yes.
I didn't mean to get into a
No.
long discussion here, but.
great question.
Yeah, good question.
Great
So,
question.
I think that we pretty much gave me an idea of
Yeah.
what's going on.
Yeah, and from a security point of view, we certainly recommend that every legal entity has its own connection. I just will say it one
Yeah.
more time.
Yeah.
Your family is a legal entity, your business is a legal entity. And everybody within that entity should be trusted. And you probably shouldn't trust anybody outside of that entity with their connection. Okay.
Yeah, so we'll spin up some of those, and Wayne's also part of that conversation at the BHCA, so we'll talk some more about that. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at the next page and then we'll say,
What was the third box?
okay, I'm sorry, that's an extender. That's a Wi-Fi extender. It can be connected either wirelessly to the other box, to the Wi-Fi gateway, or with an Ethernet cable, and it will then broadcast signal to a remote corner of your home. So if you have multiple floors, multiple floors, right?
TVs, things like that.
For a 2,000 square foot home,
You know,
for a 2,000 square foot home, the Wi-Fi gateway is probably fine if it's centrally located.
Oh,
But-
okay.
But I don't know if you've ever noticed, you have some larger homes up here.
Yes.
Not this. If you have a 2,000 square foot home, you won't need extenders.
Right, exactly my point. Yep.
Which of these units are the ones that are required to be rented?
Okay,
Or-
we're just gonna come to that in a second.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
perfectly. I just wanna get in that next page and then we'll come back. Customer can designate to locate the gateway almost anywhere in the home at the time of the install. So, providing we can get the wire to that spot, and you're not all stone construction, from the Middle Ages or whatever. We can almost always that. We recommend locating that gateway in the center of the home to provide the best overall performance. Should you choose to use gateway extenders, they can be located almost anywhere to optimize your experience. They can be connected either via an Ethernet cable up to 300 feet or wirelessly, probably a little less distance than that. I would think wirelessly. How far would you put an extender,
Well, generally 200 feet is the fringe of the range, but you want overlap
Right,
on them.
exactly.
So, 50 to 100 feet away to kind of bridge.
Yeah.
We usually would recommend any type of extender be hardwired. So we would want a home run from your gateway to that extender for optimal performance of it. When they're wirelessly backhauled, it's diminished quality on the other end of the extender. So you're sacrificing speed for some range. So it's always going to be best if you use those extenders if you had them hardwired in, which I imagine at the time of
That's
installation,
right.
they would take care of that.
All right, so now we can go back if you will. Great, thanks, thank you. Maybe. So the Wi-Fi gateway is, if you get it with your plan, is $7.95 a month and it's rental. You do not need to do that. You can get your own gateway and buy it.
Oh, that was the last slide. Sorry.
Yeah.
What did you want me to do?
Just the previous slide there.
This thing.
Yeah.
Got it.
Thank you. The middle picture, that's that, and you may get your own from a Best Buy or whatever, and the advantage, of course, is pay once. There are some disadvantages and we certainly don't encourage this hobbyists like to do this, I would say, and it's a good idea for a hobbyist, it's fine. But just a couple of quick notes. One, if anything goes wrong, we have visibility of what we call the control plane, but we can basically see how your network is operating all the way to that gateway. We can't see it if you bring in your own gateway. Our team in Green Bay can't see that anymore, and they can't help you solve problems. And we can't help you solve problems, which is the number one problem, like connecting my wireless printer, or my phone won't get on my network. So if you're hoping that we provide that support and can do that support, you lose the ability for us to help with those problems as soon as you take control of that gateway yourself. The other kind of things that get kind of technical, but you just have to be comfortable with the fact that it's not always just plug and play. If I bring my own gateway, it can be a lot of work. And if it breaks at some point down the line, because we made a change to our network that didn't break any of the other gateways, you know, we're not responsible for getting your gateway back working again. That way. So we highly recommend that, unless this is something you really enjoy doing, that you go with a rented gateway. Any questions on that?
I would just add, if you do buy your own, don't go to Best Buy.
Okay. Absolutely. Quantum attack would be better. Absolutely.
That's the routers, is that? what-
That's a router, right?
Okay.
But again, we highly recommend the rental. And if you're looking to do some home security things in your home with quantum technology, or you're looking to do some extend your network out to the garage, they can do all of that with the gateway that we provide. It doesn't preclude them from doing any of those things. So it doesn't hamper your ability to accomplish what you want to accomplish in your home from a technology point of view.
And for us, that is the best position for people to be in. You're gonna want the on-site support at the gateway. You know, that's gonna be when you call up and you are having an issue, to get that support from them with the device you're having, why it won't connect. If you have circumstances at your home, maybe a garage to connect to, or other things that you might need third-party support for, you can leave the on-site gateway there so that you still have that level of support. And you could, you know, maybe you're a hobbyist, maybe you're a do-it-yourselfer, maybe you have needs that you need an engineer to help with. You can still do that and have the on-site gateway there. So it's not a one or the other. As Bob mentioned, you can replace that gateway and put your own in, but then that's, you know, you're on your own for the support of that gateway, or your engineer's support of that gateway. So we would typically recommend that you use the ISP, in this case Ensite's gateway, so that you can call in and get the support you need.
So I'm gonna ask a couple questions about this.
Sure.
One is, I own a Google Nest mesh system. How do I use that going forward?
I mean,
So from a technical standpoint, and okay, so the gateway that Ensite provides is a network area translation device, and you never want a double NAT on your network. Google Mesh Router is also a network area translation device. Without personally knowing on these gateways if we can enable a bridge mode, so that we can pass through and you can handle the routing on the Nest. Otherwise, your Nest needs to be configured in access point mode. We only want one routing device on the network. So if we were to do, let's say this would be a typical project for us, make this Google Mesh work with this Gigaspire or whatever this unit is, right? We either need to bridge that Gigaspire and let the Mesh handle the routing, or we need to leave that in place on the routing and set the Mesh as an access point. So if you,
and then once it's an access point, everything's the same. By
yes,
the way,
you
And
can
once-
set them as access point. It still does the Wi-Fi, and then the Gigaspire. Now, to be further technical, this is broadcasting likely 2.4 and 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, same as your Google Mesh. So with an existing solution, if you add this in, you have added a lot of wireless noise in your house, and it's all doing the same thing. Your devices are trying to connect to it. Now you have competing signals. So the options would be to use the Google Mesh as is and not rent the router.
Right.
Rent the router, disable the Wi-Fi on the gateway and put it in bridge mode, which is what we generally do with other ISPs. Is we would disable those certain functions that might overlap. or just disable the Wi-Fi on the Gig Aspire and use the Google Mesh. Now, the Google Mesh is a solution that would be a router and extenders in one concise, harmonious package. So they're nice. Some of you might already have units like that. So there definitely needs to be consideration when it's installed, if there's existing or if you have future plans of expansion. So the third solution is to replace Google Nest with the gateway and the extenders from Insight. So you kind of got some.
So I thought he was going after his sensors. His sensors, we should be able to make his sensors work.
No, it
regardless.
wasn't. It was what he was
Oh,
saying.
sure.
But your question's a good one too.
Yeah, all right. So,
Because it's a mesh router. It's a
Okay.
router access point, likely a 2 or 3 unit mesh system.
so what I would say is, yes, so what you would need to do to make that work is put your PPP over E credentials in your Google Nest router if you were to eliminate our gateway. We do not have that in our lab. It's not supported. If you call up and say the credentials aren't authenticating, we'll say, oh, that must be really frustrating for you. There is so
That's our gateway.
you know,
And get rid of and put your other thing on Craigslist.
We would never say that, but we would certainly say that's very frustrating for you. We'll write up the problem. We'll see if anybody else has had solutions to it.
Sure.
But we can't debug it for you.
I think my second question was going to be exactly that, the PPPoE credentialing. If someone wants to use an existing router or mesh network that they have, that's the one piece of information they need to
Correct.
know. And you would publish that, correct, for them?
No, we wouldn't publish it.
Well, you give them the
They would call and
information.
get it, right?
Yes.
They would call and get the
So they could
information.
manually put that in on the Google, say the Google interface that they work with.
Correct.
And I think a simple way to look at it, if you have the gateway from Insight, everything's configured for you. You just have to connect your devices to the Wi-Fi. You don't have to worry about the router configuration or the head end. If you have your own equipment that you want to use alongside of it, you need to configure both of those pieces of equipment to work together. Or if you want to use your own equipment without the gateway, that configuration of the PPPoE is your responsibility. And a lot of us would then have to consult with someone to have that done. So it might be additional fees or a third party to come in and help. So the simplest way to do it, and why I would recommend it, is having that Insight gateway in place so they can do the PPPoE configuration. They can handle it. Now, if you did have a mesh system you'd already invested in, then we just need to configure everything to work together.
Yeah, but again, I would think that just put in my head, just put the primary Google unit as an access point, use it as your first extender. You might end up with one more extender than you need. If you bought the extenders perfect for your house, if you put your first Google unit as an access point and just use it as your first extender, I mean, or turn the Wi-Fi off.
I think there's few avenues of
Yeah.
configuring optimally
Yeah.
per use.
And I don't want to keep this we got to move on to the other topics. So what I'm hearing is we'll probably need to work with you guys on coming up with a few like user guide-ish kinds of things. If you do want to go down this, do it this way. If you don't, and I mean, the committee can work on
Sure,
that kind of stuff.
we view it as professional services, by the way. So at that point, we would view it, you would call either I or IT service. We don't do residential, but you do residential.
Okay.
We would look at it as professional services. So we would just say, work with your IT supplier.
I just want to, again, and for the town to hear this, right? We want to make sure that this thing called broadband works for them and under whatever circumstances they want to bring to the table. And so we just need to give them good information to make their own decisions about, do I rent this or not rent this? That's the bottom line.
The Wi-Fi extenders, can they be purchased and they're compatible with the router, or do they have to be rented from?
Our Wi-Fi extenders have to be rented.
Okay, can you install your own? Is
Yes.
this router
Yeah.
Like a
compatible?
TP-Link
with hardwired
extender.
Yes,
Wi-Fi
Yes.
extenders of a different brand, you
Absolutely.
can purchase and don't have to rent.
yes, you buy an access, you
So-
buy a router that and you turn it into an access point.
So if we stay with your router, we're pretty safe.
Right,
But then if there's less added benefit to having a rented Wi-Fi extender.
right.
It just kind of accumulates over.
Sure.
Okay.
But yes, you can extend the Wi-Fi in your home.
And that,
On their own.
daisy chain like this, or are they?
I would think it would more of a
It'd be home runs if they're
home
wired.
run star, more of
Yeah.
a star
Okay.
configuration.
So if you had two of those extenders, you'd have two wires coming to
And they're
your,
like Ethernet type of.
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly.
Other questions?
I'd just like to state that there's a lot of what ifs.
Yeah,
In this whole thing,
Yeah.
and I guess,
Yeah.
we're gonna be relying on the committee to, help us out with this kind of thing, and
You bet.
maybe, get-togethers like this with specific, generally specific areas to be handled.
excellent. Yep,
Yeah,
definitely. You can count on that.
yeah.
Yep.
And I would like to corroborate what Nathan and Bob said. I am one of those hobbyists that does administer my own network. I have my own router. And everything they said is true. If any of that sounded bewildering to you, that's probably not the way to go.
Yeah.
If you're really giving yourself a headache every once in a while, then it's your people.
You don't know as much as you thought you did.
Yes.
But we will definitely be following up with these specific kinds of issues in future kinds of conversations. Okay?
And I'll just say, to be fair, I've met with a lot of people before, and I used to do a class on Wi-Fi basics, and I used to actually suggest you can save money by not renting the router from your ISP. But I took for granted how difficult it was to deploy them, because people would go and then buy a router and then they'd call me and they'd say, why'd you tell me to do this? And it often incurs additional fees to have maybe us come in and help program it. But then at the end of the day, you have to then call for support too. And so it doesn't really save money often to put your own router in when you consider the time to program it and the lack of support you have for it. And then also, not to mention, choosing the router and all the legwork.
And
So-
if our gateway replaces breaks at any point in its lifetime, and any of you have been on Spectrum or other services, one of the things they do is they replace the gateway when they come in. That's a no charge, right? But if for some reason your thing isn't working, now you're looking at repurchasing. That is, so it's forever, 10 years. 10 years from now, speeds change, whatever stage, this device, we still replace it for free, right? So it's always there. So,
Any other installation kinds of questions?
Well, yes, so you've got the middle box there, and you have several computers, several televisions in your house.
Yeah,
You reach them wirelessly?
so that thing in the middle is a wireless router. It's they're calling it a gateway, but a lot of us call it a router, right?
They usually also have several
Right.
Ethernet ports that you could hardwire those items into if they have Ethernet ports themselves.
So for example, because we just built our house, I made sure that wherever I thought there might be a television in a room or something like that, I put one of those little Ethernet jacks there, and it's wired right back to the little switch thing I have next to the router. And because that's, like Nathan said, that's the best connection you could possibly get. With Frontier Service, I fairly rarely see the spinning circle of death. Because in part, I have a hardwired connection. If I had to go over Wi-Fi, it would probably see the spinning circle of death more frequently. So wherever you can, hardwire it. But you don't have to. It can pick up, all those devices we're putting all over the place in our homes these days can pick up a Wi-Fi connection to the thing in the middle, the box in the middle. That's what that's doing. Or if you have these extenders around your house to one of those extenders. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Let me ask.
Strutters WPS.
yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me add one thing. If you get a professional to do this, require them to give you the password.
Oh,
Sometimes they'll tell you, well, we don't want you to break it or it's a secret, and they leave. Sometimes they go out of business.
Yeah.
You cannot get into your network after that. So make sure that you tell them part of this is you require them to give you the passwords that they're gonna use.
Do they have to
Nathan would
do
never
that?
do that.
Do they have to do that?
If they don't give it to you, don't use their service.
I mean, I've never heard of somebody not sharing the password to the router.
There are.
Especially like, I mean, the Wi-Fi passwords and everything like that. There is circumstances where there might be administrative passwords that an IT provider might give you a disclaimer when you ask for it. So let's say you had a bunch of third-party network equipment, you had point-to-point equipment, and you said, what's the admin password to configure the point-to-point radio? I would say I can give that to you, but we're not responsible for any changes you make on it. But as far as your router passwords, your Wi-Fi you connect to,
The bottom of the
a
box.
lot of times they're printed on the routers now, and that's actually common practice and really helpful. So then if you forget that password, it's actually physically right underneath the router.
All right, any other questions on installation and this home networking kind of stuff? We need more of this, and we will debrief and talk about what it looks like, okay? If not, I think we're ready to pass this over to Nathan. He's going to tell us a little bit about being safe online. Let me, let's see. Oh, yes, I can.
Perfect, we can jump right in.
There you go.
So yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about just staying safe online, and this applies now already while you're waiting for your new connection to come. I'm going to give you kind of some tips and tricks that you can take away today and start using right away. But as you get these high-speed connections to their house, you're going to have access just into things a lot faster. So your kind of security footprint, gets a little larger, especially if you have kids or grandkids or guests over using your Wi-Fi, because as you have the 300 megabit circuit, people are going to want to use it now when they're visiting. So you can jump right on to the next slide. So I'm going to do just a couple minutes of explanation on what I see as an IT provider is the real problem today for homeowners with cybersecurity and where it's all starting and how we're finding ourselves in trouble. So when we go online and we create an online account, maybe it's at Amazon, it's at Google, it's somewhere, they require us to provide personally identifiable information to them: name, address, phone number, and then other stuff, maybe our age, our race, things that then can be either directly connected back to us or kind of quasi connected by using variables, right? And then they also have us create a username and password. Now, in most cases, that username is our email address, right? So we go online to Amazon, we want to make a new account. So we give them all of our personal information, and then we connect it to our email address and our password. So we give them all of our personal information with our virtual identity, right? Our email address. So it connects the two. Now they know who you are, where you live, your age, and how to get a hold of you, right? So that's fine. Amazon's a big company. They're going to keep our information safe. Well, this is the problem and what's out of our control. This is why we put safeguards in place ourselves, because we're not going to be able to trust the corporations with all that information anymore. And we're talking Amazon's a big corporation. What about, not to pick at anyone, but what about a restaurant up the street or a gas station or a hotel that we use our credit card at that we've signed up for a rewards program, whatever it might be. Next slide. Whoops. So when IT systems are breached, what happens is a bad actor, a hacker, somebody maybe inside the organization, a double agent, whatever it might be, a foreign government, they get access into the IT systems where all the information is stored. So when Amazon stores our information, I'm picking on them, but we should be talking about maybe LinkedIn, Facebook, First American Financial, Equifax, Target, Capital One. You can't even keep track of how many in a year, right? And every time I do these talks, I have to update this list with the more relevant stuff. So we give all of our personally identifiable information, we connect it to our virtual identity, we give them our password, and they leak it. It gets breached, it gets stolen, it gets maybe internally, someone accidentally copies a bunch of it and someone hacks into an email, whatever happens. But the big thing, the big picture, the thing we can't control is we give our personal information out, it gets leaked through these major corporations that I mentioned, and it could be your bank, it could be Equifax, something else happens out of your control and all of your information is leaked. So what do we do to safeguard that? Right? We we can't not use these services. We need to use these services. These services are imperative to our lives. And as we get connected with faster and more modern connections, we're gonna have more and more and more of these, which makes that footprint just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We don't even remember all the places our information is. We don't even remember everywhere we've created an account and have a password. Next slide. So how are we going to keep these accounts protected? How are we going to protect ourselves? How are we going to make sure that if our information is leaked, that we know it was leaked, we know how to control it, we know how to fix it, and take action? So the biggest thing we can do today is two-factor and multi-factor authentication. It doesn't cost anything. So does anyone here do online banking or go to pay their credit card online? So you know the process when you go to sign in and then it like wants to send a code to your cell phone, and we know it's terribly inconvenient, super annoying. But that's the biggest thing we can do to protect an individual account. So why is that important? Well, let's say that it's your bank account and the bank gets breached and they steal your username and password. The first thing they do is they go to the bank to test your username and password, right? Well, if they have the correct combination and there's no 2FA, they're in. So there's nothing to protect you from a breach you can't control and someone logging into your bank account if you don't have 2FA. There's nothing there. All they need is the username and password combination. Now, how does the bad people get the username and password combination after a breach? They're simply sold on dark web marketplaces. Just like you go to eBay and buy something, you can go to a dark web marketplace and buy a list of names and data from a breach for pennies per person, because that's how much the actual data is worth until it's validated. So we have to have 2FA and MFA on our accounts. If there's any accounts you sign up for and they give you a choice, if they ask you if you want to have 2FA set up, if they're reminding you when you log in, every time you log in, there's a splash page that says, please set up your 2FA, and you're hitting skip out of convenience, there's nothing protecting that account from a bad actor getting in. So remember how I said a lot of times our username is our email address? What if the username and password that gets leaked is your email account? Now a person can impersonate you in email, they can, right? So you absolutely imperative. You Gmail, Yahoo, AOL, whatever your email is, you need to make sure you have 2FA set up on it. If somebody gets that username and password, they have access into everything, right? Next one. So the second part of this is, what if you use the same username and password for every single account? And this is something that most people do, or variation of, right? Because how could you possibly remember 100 passwords? So if you use the same username and password for all your accounts, one breach affects all of your accounts. LinkedIn breaches, but use the same password for LinkedIn you use for your credit card. Now, because a lot of these are major corporations, once they have a username and password combination, they simply go to the largest providers of services to try to impersonate you, to brute force in, to log in. So the chance that it's 100% likelihood that every person in this room has had their information leaked in a breach. If you ever got a phone call for your car warranty, if you ever got a call someone that knows your name is trying to scam you, have you ever gotten weird solicitations in email or mail after you were trying to book a trip to Mexico and now there's stuff coming to your mailbox, right? Our information is bought, sold, stolen, traded daily. And if you use the same password for it all, every time someone gets your combination, they could potentially hit any of your accounts. So second to 2FA, the second big thing you can do is organize your passwords, and they need to be unique for every account you have. That's difficult to do, but it's something you need to practice towards and strive towards. And this is what we're teaching kids in technology education coming out of school, so they can be a little more prepared, because the practice always was writing your password down and your password's password one. Well, the day and age now of everything getting leaked, we have to use a unique password. So if you use a unique password for every account, you can organize it with a password manager. And these are built into Google Chrome. Apple has the keychain. Those are free and built on with the tools you're already using. Because password management is a secure subject, I do recommend products that you would pay for that would be your password manager. $5 a month and you have one master password encrypted and secured, and your passwords are saved in there. The tools generate the passwords for you and keep track of them for you. So you no longer have to write it in the book or manage it. You change a password on the website, it updates in the tools. That's
And it crosses platform.
cross-platform.
So you've got it on your phone, you've got it on your laptop, you've got it on your iPad, it's all there, cross-platform. That's
Yep.
really the beauty of a third-party tool. It's not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where if you're using Google or Apple, you got to live in that ecosphere. They're free and they're available to you. But if as soon as you go from your Mac to your Android phone, you're like, oh, where's my password? So it's highly recommended to use third party using free tools. We use the product Keeper, but there's also lots of other ones out there. 1Password, LastPass. Both of those are, you know, those are kind of the bigger products out there, but there's lots of them. The reason we use Keeper is they have a reseller agreement that we're part of. I've used various tools over the years. They're also the best one I've also used. So when we started to build a relationship with them, it was easy for me because they had next. The third thing we need to do is make sure we never allow remote access to a computer or device when a stranger is soliciting us. And this can come in multiple vectors, but often it's a person calling you on the phone. Same thing, your personally identifiable information and your targets. They look at the information, they sort it probably from, you know, age down, right? They don't start going at the 18 and 20-year-olds. They start at the other side of the range here. They pick up the phone, they call someone who they have their information, they know your name, they say, I'm from Microsoft, and the reason I'm calling is your computer's badly infected, and it's sending thousands of viruses out, and we noticed it here, you know, and it's so bad that we're gonna need to log in and fix this. It's gonna be an emergency if we don't. That's how these calls can start, right? And they'll impersonate Google, they'll impersonate Apple. Now, sometimes they know what kind of devices you have from previous browsing history and things that might have been released in a leak. So if you visit our website and it logs a visitor, we know if you have Apple, we know if you have Google, right? Things like that. They use information like that to try to legitimize themselves. So if they know if you have all Apple devices, they'll say they're from Apple and try to gain access to your computer. So you have to always have your defenses up when you're answering phone calls from strangers. And this isn't just IT related. When people are asking for donations for bulletproof vests for the police officers, you have to do your diligence when someone is soliciting you on the phone. But in the past, the call started and ended on the phone. It was easy to hang up. These new wave of attacks, if they gain access to your computer, it's very difficult then to differentiate that it's a scammer or a hacker or that it's not actually Microsoft. So we see these cases every single day, the bank, the sheriff's department, or they come directly to us because that's what happens now. If you get someone on the computer and they steal your money and you call the bank tells you that you need to bring your computer to have it looked over and have the tools removed. The same if you go to the sheriff's department and say, I think I've been scammed, you need to go to the bank and get your money figured out, and you need to have the computer secured. So by being proactive, by having some tools in place to protect against it, you can avoid the potential costly mistake. The other way that these guys get connected to your computer, they basically will hijack websites or buy legitimate advertising, maybe like out on Yahoo, maybe even out on Google, and you might click a link sometime, or you might be browsing it, like locks up your computer and it starts playing an alarm and it says you need to call this number right now. This is Microsoft warning you, your browsing data is going to be leaked, your financial data is going to be leaked, we're going to take your contacts. That's the other way that we see these perpetrators. It locks up your browser window and it's an ad, but it looks like a blue screen or it looks like a legitimate problem. And the only way you can solve it is by calling that number. So if that ever happens, if you ever are stuck in that situation, you can literally power down your computer. If you can't close the browser, maybe the X doesn't work, maybe it's locked on that page, that's the time to just power down your computer, restart it, and start fresh with it. That's, yeah. So this is really the beginning steps of cybersecurity. There's an endless cat and mouse game, because every time that we plug one hole, every time that a new process or system is improved to safeguard us, they find another way. And we've heard the stories of people getting the gift cards at the store and $2,000 in gift cards and reading numbers back because it's easier to track payments now, things like that. So beyond these three things, if anyone is ever trying to get you to scratch off gift cards to pay for something, anyone ever wants you to pay for something over the phone or over a computer with gift cards, with Bitcoin, with Venmo, with alternative payment methods you've never heard of, that is 100% red flag for a scam. So I didn't mean to scare anybody.
No, but it's.
Well, here's your last slide. Maybe you could just say something.
Yeah, so we do community training on this subject. It's something I'm very passionate about. I also talk amongst the IT community. I do several conferences a year where I talk about this with my peers, but we do simple kind of classes and courses. They're 2 hours long. So it's a lot more information than I give in something like this. And we have a page on our website. So if you go to quantumpc.com, there's a banner up there that says free digital literacy classes, but you can also go to quantumpc.com/training. Sign up on there as we're kind of just building our areas where we're going to go. But yeah, we've been doing these at Learning and Retirement, NWTC in Sister Bay, Crest Pavilion. We could even do them here. We're kind of looking for places in the community where we would have good turnout.
Have any of these password saver programs been hacked?
Absolutely. I mentioned LastPass is LastPass.
What I use.
So LastPass actually had an incident, but you have, the reason I like LastPass, I like 1Password, I like Keeper. There's kind of these bigger players and they have a zero trust, zero access policy. So like the LastPass employees can't see your passwords. If you screw up your LastPass, they're not going to save it for you. Like it literally is encrypted end to end and you have the keys to that. So when the information, they suffered their own breach, but it wasn't their customers' passwords. It was their back end where they would have saved your name, your email address, your address, like when you signed up for the account. Still a data breach. I appreciate that they disclosed it. They took action and they were very communicative, even though it wasn't necessarily a breach of their services. And for LastPass, it's hurt their reputation very badly.
Yeah.
In the IT community, people that recommended it and chose that platform have to talk to their customers and explain what happened.
Yeah, and basically now it's just a matter of you go in there and you have to change the back end passwords. That's what I've been doing. So, but the master password was never breached, and that was the important piece. So.
And if you ever do find yourself wanting to switch password manager services, it's generally very easy. You can export all of your information and then import it into a new service, and it's pretty seamless.
That's an excellent point. Like all the tools kind of have this encrypted back end between them where they make seamless transfer of your passwords between services securely. But beyond that, when you set one of these up, if you already have passwords saved in your Chrome or in your browser, it sees those right away and imports them for you. So if you're on your computer and you have Google Chrome and you've been letting it save your passwords, it'll copy them into the password manager tool. And most people are kind of surprised to see everything that was saved in there. Like, oh, I forgot I had these accounts, or
yeah.
And that's usually when we're consulting that we start to know that, because we help with these transitions. That's, if we notice that every single password is the same, then we start to help. How do we change these en masse? They're always the same. So if you feel guilty that you use the same password, you're not alone.
But your tool will now tell you, by the way.
It will. The
It
tools
will
will give you they'll give you a little dashboard that says you're reusing your password on 98 sites and advise you how to change them or whatever.
Right.
A security score.
And they keep track of big data breaches as well. So they will inform you if any of your website specific passwords have been compromised and notify you to change stuff.
And which other passwords are impacted. So let's say you did have a shared password and there's a breach on a site, it would say, this site's been breached and you have a password, but you've used that password on these 20 accounts. They all need to be updated. And that's where having that unique password, if you use the unique password, every single account, when there's a breach, you get to change that one password and you don't have to, worry so much about that news because you've done something.
What's the general price range for services?
$5 a month is pretty typical.
I pay $60 a year for Dashlane, I think,
Yep.
on a yearly.
It's about $5 a month.
Yep.
It's a good investment.
And they keep more than your passwords as well. Like Bob mentioned, Dashlane, that's another really popular tool. And it can also keep your credit card number in there, which can make like online payments a little more secure and easy, or even like a kind of a copy of like your birth certificate and social security. And then you can also set up, you know, a legacy event for those accounts. So if something were to happen that your spouse or someone could inherit, you know, your information, which is, goes a long way.
All right, I think we're at time. Any last comment or question? Yes.
Can you comment about LifeLock?
Sure. So LifeLock's a third-party service that kind of is a credit monitoring and financial event monitoring service. I believe it's about $40 per year. They've suffered their own breach, by the way, this year, which I thought was kind of interesting. We used to kind of support that product prior to Norton acquiring them, but I think it's a valid service for someone that wants an extra layer of privacy protection for their financial. You know, if someone tries to take out a loan in your name, if somebody, you know, if your name shows up in a breach in a financial sector, those types of things. It's often offered after a breach. They give you like 1 year free. LifeLock is usually part of the compensation. So like when Equifax was breached, then they partnered with LifeLock, and then LifeLock offered this credit monitoring service that alerts you if there's any change on your credit and things like that. So,
and we have a financial session. Our last session includes online finance stuff and government services. So things like that, hopefully we can talk
if somebody
more about.
steals your identity and you don't have LifeLock, you are on, you know, you do have to kind of clean that up on your own, and down to someone stealing your driver's license and impersonating you. And so I think LifeLock is really designed to pass off some of that liability in the event of identity theft as well.
Yeah.
So credit and identity, I think.
One of the major components to what LifeLock does is credit monitoring and freezing, which you can actually do yourself with the big three credit monitoring companies, Equifax, Experian, and I can't remember the other one. What was it?
TransUnion, maybe?
TransUnion, that's it. You can create an account with each of those, and you can freeze your credit for each of them. So, you know, unless you're taking loans or new credit cards out every week, you know, you're probably not going to notice a freeze, and you can manually toggle that if you have anything like that. So that's an option without paying for LifeLock.
All right, I want to thank our guests again, Bob and Nathan, for helping us this morning talk about installation and privacy. Next week, we have, we're going to talk about the affordability of broadband and some of the programs that are have existed for a while, but some new programs that are up. And then the last week will be again talking about financial services and government services online. We really appreciate the ideas for for other topics that, you know, we want to get into. It sounds like more user guides, things like that. We probably want to be putting together for folks to be able to access to. So really appreciate all your participation, and don't hesitate if you got any other ideas or questions, just let us know. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
I said all the brochures are too if anyone wants.